From the Western Mass News studios in Springfield, this is Western Mass News Getting Answers with Dave Mattson.
Thanks for joining me for this week's edition of Western Mass News Getting Answers. This week, we have the second in a series of 5 debates featuring candidates for local, state Senate, and House seats. This week, we focus on the Hampden, Hampshire Senate seat that's been held by Democrat John Velis of Westfield since 2020. He's being challenged by Republican and Agawam City Councilor Cecilia Calabrese. Well, the Hampden, Hampshire State Senate District was redrawn after the 2020 census. It includes the cities of Agawam, East Hampton, Holyoke, West Springfield, and Westfield, as well as 2 precincts in Chicopee, along with the towns of Montgomery, Russell, and Southampton. A lot of territory. Now, there will be no opening or closing statements. I'll ask questions of the candidates in hopes of opening a dialogue between the 2 of them so you can learn more about where they stand on the issues. Councilor Calabrese, Senator Velis, good to see you. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. All right, we tossed a coin to see who will get the first question. It was won by Senator Velis, so I'll address it to you. Senator, what do you see as the critical differences between you and your opponent?
Well, I think first and foremost, I'm currently in office. I am set to be the senior senator from Hampden County. So, we live in a region of the state that historically has been ignored, I think. So I think having a seat at the table, the ability to bring back vital resources to this district, like I've done both as a senator and a rep, really, really matters, especially right now. So I think there's that experience, that institutional knowledge. And then I also think there's my approach to politics. I mean, I've got a very bipartisan approach and bipartisan voting record. When I go out and I knock on doors and talk to people, one of the first things that people bring up is, John, we see how you vote. We see that you cross party lines. And one of my frequent refrains is, I firmly believe that both a Democrat and a Republican are capable of a good idea. I work closely both with the Democratic Senate President, Karen Spilka, as well as the minority leader, Bruce Tarr. And I think that's really, really important. Another thing that I would just point out is my vision and my version of politics. Quite frankly, the tone and tenor of this campaign. Every election that I've been in, from state rep to today, I always tell people I'm not running against anybody. I'm running for an office. You're never going to see me, criticizing a fellow candidate. I think it's a great thing. One of the first things that I said when Councilor Calabrese joined the race was, I think it's great. I think it's healthy for our democracy. I think it's healthy for our republic. And I just think that we should have more competitive elections. And then the last thing I would touch is that, I've had a unique experience these past 2 years being the chairman of the Veterans and Federal Affairs Committee. We've passed monumental legislation, and I am absolutely convinced that one of the reasons we've been able to do that is my status as a veteran and someone who's serving, because it gives me that feet in both doors to know what's truly going on out there and talking to current service members.
Councilor Calabrese, the critical differences between you and Senator Velis.
Well, it's a shame, Senator Velis, that you didn't have the compassion for veterans that we needed at the time when the Holyoke Soldiers Home was looking for a new leader, and you recommended someone that didn't have the experience needed. And we can now see in hindsight what ended up happening up there, and that's really a shame. One of the other things that differentiates us is that I've been paying attention to Senator Velis' voting record, and he does vote with Republicans, but when the die has already been cast. They vote in alphabetical order up there, so that means that by the time his vote comes around, we already know the outcome. But let's talk about his voting record. Let's talk about the fact that he voted to take away your right to drive a gas and diesel powered vehicle. You seniors out there, all right, I know you're hurting, you're scared, you're probably relying on your 401ks and your IRAs to make ends meet, and you've seen the value of those assets go down. You business owners, all right, we know that you're not millionaires. You're trying to make ends meet. You're making business decisions and hiring people and keeping good employees on, and people that are living paycheck to paycheck, leaning on credit cards more and more. You're hurting, and you're hurting because of policies that my opponent, Senator Velis, has voted for. And a little bit more about my background. I have a 30-year business experience here in Western Massachusetts, so I am you. I have 17 years experience on the Agawam City Council. 9 times the people in Agawam elected me to City Council. I've worked on the Massachusetts Municipal Association Board of Directors, and I served as their president. I will be that strong voice for Western Massachusetts that we need on Beacon Hill.
Councilor Velis, Senator Velis, a chance to respond.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. First and foremost, with the Soldiers' Home, I mean, what Councilor Calabrese is referencing is a report that was subsequently just completely invalidated. There's not a single person that cites that report anymore. But I'm actually glad the councilor brought up that report. You know, I will put my record up against anybody as it relates to the Soldiers' Home and the Veterans Affairs. Let's talk about the Soldiers' Home. Let's talk about leading the charge on getting a new $400 million home at that facility. But let's even rewind it even further. And I would also just point out that I think it is absolutely reprehensible that the tragedy at the Soldiers' Home has been politicized, not only in this campaign, in other ones as well, but the report that Councilor Calabrese is citing, again, was widely invalidated by the most instructive and most expansive investigation that took place for things like inconsistencies, for things like not reaching out to everybody. But again, and to be honest with you, no one even brings that up anymore. But I have to be honest with you, oversight, reform, who led that charge? Myself, as the chairman of Veterans and Federal Affairs. I mean, this is legislation that we got done, a chain of command, putting in safeguards to ensure that it never happens again. I mean, I thought we were going to have a conversation about all of the great things that have been done with respect to oversight, not just of the Holyoke Soldiers' Home, but all of our soldiers' homes. So, I mean, I would put my record against any other legislator in America as it relates to Veterans Affairs. That includes the Soldiers' Home. And then respect to I don't know where this is emanating from. You know, I think the issue that Councilor Calabrese is talking about is a vote that we took on climate legislation. This notion that I want to get rid of gas-driven cars is nonsensical. What the bill at the most fundamental level was about was transforming energy and transportation in the Commonwealth, but doing it by a very measured way. I mean, I would just point out that not only did 2/3 of Republicans vote for that bill, Governor Baker signed that bill. And what I would just say is that the 2035, what that enables us to do is to stop, recalibrate, and adjust like we frequently do. So if we get closer to that date and time, and there's a real issue about folks not being able to drive any certain type of car, we revisit it. But just to be clear, again, I don't know where this is coming from, but I most certainly do not want to take anyways gas-powered car. That's insane.
Councilor Calabrese?
That's what the vote was, though. That is exactly what the vote was. That's what you voted for. And that's what's hurting people today. When you go and you try to fill up that gas tank and you're trying to buy milk and eggs and bread all in the same week, I want you to think about that vote, because that's exactly what the vote was. And you can try to step away from it, but I know what that vote was.
No, I'm just to be very clear, you know, the councilor brought up another great thing, the gas tax. Every single vote that I've taken, and Councilor Calabrese knows this, I've crossed party lines with the Republicans to repeal, to suspend the gas tax. And quite frankly, I guess I would just point this out and then we can move on. The legislation in question, the overwhelming majority of it hasn't even taken effect yet. So the notion that this is responsible for, we all know that things, well, whether it's Russia's invasion of Ukraine, whether it's Saudi Arabia saying we're going to cut oil by 2 million barrels a day, the Iranian nuclear deal maybe not happening where there's $1.5 million that might not come out of the market, to suggest that this bill, where the overwhelming majority of it is going to have an impact on this, when I have a voting record, specifically as it relates to gas, of always crossing party lines. You know, there's a saying in politics, you know, facts are stubborn things, and everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but everybody's not entitled to their own facts. And my voting record is explicitly clear. I have crossed party lines more than 96% of other Democrats in the legislature. And again, as I pointed out, the thing that most people give me attaboys about, to be very candid with you, when I knock on their door, the thousands of doors that I've knocked on, is we love your bipartisan approach. We love that you work with both parties. And what I would just say to people is, if they have questions on that, ask my Republican colleagues in government. You know, this divisiveness and this inability to have conversations, I firmly believe, is the biggest problem, not only here in the Commonwealth, but in the nation, if we don't start to elect and re-elect people that share that belief. we're going to be in a world of hurt.
All right, let's move on. Councilor Calabrese, the single most pressing issue facing Massachusetts, and if elected, what would you do to take care of it?
The single most pressing issue facing Western Massachusetts is that Boston is out of step with the people here. There are issues in the 9 cities and towns involved in this district that are not being addressed. Let's just take up West Springfield. Now, West Springfield, you're unique because you do not have an incumbent senator on the ballot this year, but I know that you have issues with homelessness, you have issues with that Route 5 corridor needing traffic calming and noise mitigation. Agawam, we know our issues with water, and we have people in Feeding Hills that some of them can't even do their laundry when it's raining. Russell, Montgomery, you're trying to get high-speed internet and reliable wireless phone service that doesn't go out when a storm blows in. East Hampton, you have issues with vandalism. Everyone is impacted by crime. The revolving door at the criminal courthouse is just, it's just unacceptable. I will be that strong voice for your needs. Westfield, I know that you have roads that have potholes. You have your custom-made pothole signs on Meadow Street and East Mountain Road. You know, every March they pop up because we're not getting the funding that we need for our roads and bridges. The senator knows that Chapter 90 is based on population. Well, all the population is out in the eastern part of the state, and he was part of the committee that actually, we lost one of our Senate seats here. We used to have 2 Senate seats here. Now we only have 1. And our voices are not being heard in Boston. I will be your strong voice in Boston for Western Massachusetts.
Senator, the most pressing issue, I know you probably want to respond to that.
Inflation, cost of living.
Yeah.
You know, I can't begin to tell you the number of constituents that have reached out to me. I mean, folks are getting it at the gas tank, hence my vote to suspend it. Folks are getting it at the grocery store. Folks are getting it when they go out to dinner. There's the cost of heating oil that's going up. They're getting it at every single corner. You know, if you look at my record, not rhetoric, just a long career of hopping party laws and some of these real fiscal policies that would give money back to people and put money back in people's pockets. You know, one of the things that I've been very proud of, in addition to the gas tax, is literally every single tax vote that's been out there, if it makes sense, and many of them have been to vote, again, with the cross-party lines. But what's in front of us right now is, obviously, we've got those 62 F checks that we're going to be sending back to the population next month. And then, obviously, there's the tax reform and the economic development bill that I fully anticipate will get done here in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Tax relief for the senior center, the senior circuit breaker tax credit, child care tax credit. Childcare is another issue. I mean, there are so many issues. People are just being overwhelmed with costs, and we need to put that money back into the people's pockets. Right there, just the crime stuff. I agree with Councilor Calabrese. This has been something, you know, I've worked hand in hand with Governor Baker on his dangerousness hearing bill. You know, this is something that if we were to spend, we could talk forever about just that bill itself in terms of the number of offenses that are out there that the Commonwealth doesn't even have the ability to ask to hold someone on. It's a revolving door. I think it's less of a bail issue and more of an expanding this thing called the 58A hearing. But I would just point out, again, I mean, this is something that, as Governor Baker would say, I mean, I've been a staunch ally in this, so much so that on the last day of session, the Senate actually passed a version of the dangerousness hearing bill, and I'd like to think I was a big part of doing that. But the revolving door, the low bails, I mean, people are putting at risk, and I would argue that at some point in time, you know, we've moved as a society, and I think this is a really bad thing from a society that prioritizes over and over again the well-being of criminal defendants and rehabilitating them to the detriment of victims and public safety. That needs to be recalibrated back and forth, and that's an area where I think that we are in agreement of. And I think it's an area where I have demonstrated, again, by voting records, you know, my commitment to public safety. And it's why, in this race in particular, every police organization that I'm aware of is backing me in this race.
All right, we have to take a break. When we come back, we're going to hear more from the candidates for the Hampden, Hampshire Senate seat, incumbent John Velis and his challenger, Cecilia Calabrese. Stay with us.
Debate that.
Welcome back to Western Mass News Getting Answers. My guests this week are the two candidates for Hampden, Hampshire State Senate seat, incumbent John Velis and his Republican Chancellor, Councilor Cecilia Calabrese. Senator Velis, you had the first question in the last segment. Councilor Calabrese will give you this first question.
Okay.
America facing a mental health crisis. Rates of anxiety and depression, especially among young people, are spiking. Massachusetts has secured $10 million to get it up and running, but permanent funding sources yet to be established. How would you work to get that permanent funding passed? Because we hear this is going to be a huge problem.
Oh my goodness, this has to be such an all hands on deck effort. And this is at the point where I demonstrated my ability to work across party lines. We need to come together as a unified front. Mental health is so important when we're dealing with things like addiction and anxiety and depression and the increased suicide rate among our veterans. And I'm not telling the senator anything he doesn't already know. So this is definitely one of those areas where we need to put partisan politics aside, work together as a team for the sake of the long-term future of the mental health of everyone.
Senator Velis?
Yeah, it's an issue. It's an issue I spend a lot of time talking about. I'm the vice chairman of the Mental Health, Substance Use, and Recovery Committee. But a lot of people are getting this wrong, right? This mental health crisis predated COVID. It's certainly been exacerbated by COVID. Mm-hmm. I mean, this pandemic has been many things, but first and foremost, it's a pandemic of isolation. Really proud. I would say one of the proudest votes that I took this last session was the Mental Health Bill 2.0, and the bill was absolutely filled with good things. But I think one of the most important things is that it requires insurance companies to actually pay for a mental health visit. A lot of us, we go to a doctor's and it's, how are you breathing? What's your blood pressure? But we don't ask the questions. Hey, how are you feeling? What's going on between your ears? I mean, we need to talk about what's going on in people's minds. There's a stigma that's still out there. The number of people, and I'm really glad you brought this up, when I've knocked on their door, that, we talked about the biggest thing, and I mentioned, inflation, cost of living. This is right there. Mm. And this is going to be a crisis that continues to go on and on and on. So it's about incentivizing people to go into this workforce. It's about making insurance cover this type of treatment. And it's co-occurring. I mean, 9 times out of 10, if you're talking to someone with a substance use issue, it's co-occurring with a mental health issue. Mm-hmm. We need to reinvest so much into combating this. We talk about kids and everything that they went through, being out of school, remote learning. I mean, you're seeing a correlation with the test scores right now with young kids right now and the MCAS thing. And everybody's attributing that to being outside of school. Mental health is a huge problem, but it's all ages. It affects everybody. It knows no limits. So we've done a great job, particularly in the Senate, and it's something that I certainly, as the vice chairman, will continue to lead on.
I know, yeah, on that note, you talk about the MCAS scoring and the trouble that they're having with that. Let me ask you this, that the State Board of Education has now raised the bar on those MCAS scores. Do you think that was the right thing to do at this time?
No, and I think we need to actually get rid of MCAS scores. I think there's a tendency of teachers to teach to the test. I've spoken with a number of people of people on school committees in the local communities, and there's this universal sentiment that really we're going in the wrong direction with MCAS.
Senator, what do you think about that? Because I know a lot of superintendents are really against this.
I mean, if you think about it, it's to the counselor's point. I mean, if you're in a curriculum where the vast majority of that time is spent preparing for the MCAS, to the detriment of so many other skills that are out there that are going to prepare our students for the next level, and really just whatever that may be. So it's limiting the MCAS, getting rid of it. And also, we could spend a lot of time talking about the need to increase and expand vocational education out there. I mean, we don't invest nearly enough in that. We've seen, just in my district, Westfield Technical Academy, everything that they're doing, Holyoke Community College, so many things. One of the biggest issues we face in this Commonwealth is that we've got an aging workforce. The baby boomer generation is retiring. And we've got a skills gap, and that gap is that there is not enough people today to fill the jobs of the future. We need to reinvest in that, and I think a really good place to do that would be to get rid of the MCAS and start teaching kids things that are actually going to allow them to find jobs in this next economy.
All right, we have to take another break. Time is flying. Too fast.
Too fast.
When we come back, more from the candidates for the Hampden, Hampshire Senate seat. Incumbent John Velis and his challenger, Cecilia. Calabrese. Stay with us. Welcome back. My guest on this week's edition of Western Mass News Getting Answers are the two candidates for the Hampden, Hampshire Senate seat, incumbent John Velis and his Republican challenger, Agawam City Councilor Cecilia Calabrese. Senator Velis, what's the most important thing that voters should know about you?
I think it's really important, and I'm really going to answer this question by just telling you a lot of what I hear at the doors, right? I'm a firm believer in pounding pavement and talking to people, meeting them where they are. And it's my approach. It's that approach of being willing to sit down with anybody, push the noise aside, and that firm belief, like I said in the first segment, that both a Democrat and a Republican are capable of a good idea. And my vote will follow that idea. And why I bring that up is because, if you look at the divisiveness in our country, where parties are attacking people, it's getting personal. It is absolutely awful. And I'll just quickly end with this. My first time in 2013 when I was in Afghanistan, this is actually why I ran for office. My job was I ran rule of law in the Zabul province, and seeing the discord, seeing people fighting each other, seeing people not willing to compromise. But I saw a willingness to compromise that, quite frankly, I don't see in America right now. My willingness to work with anybody at any point in time and not keep it personal, right? Mm-hmm. This is politics. This isn't war. We should be working together, not criticizing people. And I think that is exactly what people want right now. And that's what they have.
Councilor Calabrese, what's the most important thing they should know about you?
I know we're short on time, so I'm going to reference my webpage. Go on to www.calabrese2022.com, and you can send me any questions that you have. I'm an extremely responsive person. I've got 17 years of taking care of the people in Agawam, and I look forward to taking care of everyone in the 9 cities and towns in this district. And I've had experience working in a bipartisan way to get things done. That's why I was elected president of the Massachusetts Municipal Association in 2020, to look out for the 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts. And I look forward to bringing that energy and that experience to work for you in Boston from Western Massachusetts.
All right, as we wrap up, Senator Velis, the best piece of advice ever shared with you that you carry with you?
Well, I guess I would say it's something I spend a lot of time thinking about right now, because I've got a 9-month-old, Carson, or just under 9 months, and I look at him a lot, and I wonder about the world that he's been brought into and kind of the craziness that we're witnessing right now. And it was actually my papu, which is grandfather in Greek, who just told me, just to do the right thing, even if it's not popular, and let the results fall where they may.
Councilor Calabrese, best advice ever shared with you?
Never sell out your principles, and put your faith and trust in God.
All right. Thank you both.
Of course.
This time flew by, and I thank you both for being here today.
Thank you so much, John.
Agawam City Councilor Cecilia Calabrese, Senator John Velis. We should remind you now that early voting runs from October 22nd to November 4th. Hours and locations by cities and towns, but they must include some weekend hours too, so keep an eye out for that. Check with your local election office or town clerk for specific hours and locations. You can also vote by mail. The application deadline is Tuesday, November the 1st. So that's it for this week. I'm Dave Mattson. Stay safe, stay well, and if you can, join us next week for another edition of Western Mass News Getting Answers.